Welcome to the Midweek Mailbag, your Detroit Lions midweek podcast where we answer all of your Detroit Lions questions that we get over on Twitter. We get over on our Pride of Detroit Direct subscriber email, secret email, that if you're a subscriber, you get pridedetroit.com/subscribe if you want to subscribe. And yeah, we give you these weekly mailbags in the middle of the week all through the offseason. You thought we were done? Thought maybe we were taking a break? Okay, we took like a 1 week break. But now we're back. We're doing it. Getting into the swing of things as the offseason really kind of hits its stride. Maybe not hits its stride, but really starts this upcoming week when the NFL Combine goes down in Indianapolis. But anyways, my name is Jeremy Reisman. I'm the producer over at Pride of Detroit. You can find me at Detroit Online on socials. With me, as always, is General Manager of Pride of Detroit. Is the machine. Is at Erik Schlitt on Twitter. It's Erik Schlitt. How we doing, buddy?
Hey, bud. It's nice that I got a title change. It's very appropriate with all the other Detroit Lions staff
in the offseason,
changes
you're the
being
general
announced.
manager.
Yeah, I mean, like everybody gets little tweaks here and there, and we saw a lot of those when the coaching staff was announced this week. So,
That's right.
I think it's appropriate.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And you know what? I might just give you another one next week. But we are going to talk a little bit about the coaching staff as it has been finalized this week. I do want to start with a little bit more of a topical question, somehow more topical than somehow more topical than the coaching staff, because yesterday, and we're recording this on Wednesday, so Tuesday, the window opened for franchise and transition tags to be placed. No one's done it yet. There's been rumors. I think T. Higgins is likely going to get it from Cincy. But Dennis R., one of our subscribers on Pride of Detroit Direct, asks, with all the upcoming free agency talk, nobody has mentioned the franchise or transition tags. Is it because none of our free agents are worth that level of money? Carlton Davis might be the closest, but I would not pay him an estimated $20 million per year, and I don't think the Lions would either. What about the transition tag on anyone?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with Dennis here that I don't think any of the pending free agents that the Lions have would qualify for either. The franchise tag, like he said, is $20 million for Carlton. It varies depending on position. So like quarterback, it's double that. So it's over $40 million for a quarterback, right? But $20 million for a quarterback. The other guy, I think that would be the next highest free agent, Zeitler. They're not paying him $25 million. They're probably paying him about maybe a fifth of that.
The unfortunate thing in this particular case with the franchise and transition tags is the offensive linemen are all one group.
Right. So guards and tackles all match. Yeah.
Right. Even though a tackle is generally more valuable in the NFL, a guard and a tackle have the same franchise tag and transition tag numbers, which is, over $25 million.
So when you look at the transition numbers, though, you get a slight discount because you get there's slightly less reward as well,
significantly less reward.
Well, yeah, I guess, yeah,
because
I agree with that. Significantly less,
because the difference is if you franchise tag someone and someone gives that guy a contract and you don't match it, you get 2 first-round picks. Almost never happens, but it's a humongous reward. Mm-hmm. Transition tag, it's basically the same thing. It's a lower price, but if someone gives them a contract and you don't match it, you get diddly. You get nothing.
Right.
Maybe you get a compensatory pick. I believe they still are eligible for that, but
yeah, it's not great. It's rarely used. We've seen it used, probably one time in the last 5 to 10 years that I can think of that the transition tag's been used.
I think once in the last 5 years.
Okay. And so it's not often the case, one, because people don't like taking the risk of not getting any compensation, because you're only saving, like 10% or 15% of your contract, right? You're not saving that much when you're talking about top of the scale type players and paychecks and stuff like that. So it's not as often used. It is there. for a guy on the Lions roster, I don't think any of them are eligible to put a bow on it. It'd be 20 million for a franchise tag, but it'd be 17 million for a transition tag. And so on Carlton, thank you.
Yeah.
For corner. And then again, varies depending on position.
Yeah.
For a guy like, go ahead.
I was going to move to another guy like Levi, let's say. Levi is a guy that we've been talking about who might get more than people expect. He might get into the 10 to 15 range. You transition tag him, you're paying him 18.9 for 1 year.
Yeah,
unless the cheap version.
Yeah, unless he points out the fact that he played on the edge probably more than he played on the interior, then the price goes up a little bit more, right?
Yeah.
And so it's more than what the players are probably at from a financial perspective. So I don't expect the Lions to touch it. In the case of T. Higgins, like you mentioned, the wide receiver market is, you're paying them 28, 30 million, right? Like the top of the tier guys. Franchise tag is 25. So a guy like Higgins, who they think could be, one of the more top tier wide receivers in the NFL, 25 million is about what they might average for him anyway. So it's worth it to franchise tag him. It gives you options if you want to trade him and then get compensation. Lions just aren't in that boat.
Yeah. The only other thing I want to add is with the franchise tag and the transition tag, those are essentially just placeholders, right? They're placeholder contracts because in most cases, they want to just come up with an extension. Those are like, hey, this is us showing interest. We don't really want you to go anywhere. We're going to sign you to a long-term deal. We are just kind of extending the runway, so to speak, because if you don't franchise tag them, you don't come to a long-term agreement, and then suddenly they're regular free agents. They can talk with anybody and all that. So, if the Lions were to say use the transition tag on Levi Onwuzurike, that doesn't mean they're on the hook for $18.9 million a year. But at the same time, if they can't come to a long-term agreement, that's the contract. That's what they have to deal with. And if someone else offers something else and they can't match it, then they're in trouble. Like, they lose them, and they wouldn't get anything in return other than maybe a compensatory pick.
And we should point out, like, these are also situations where if you franchise tag a player and you try and do it multiple years, there's a penalty for that. It increases by, so like if the Bengals franchise Higgins and then they want to franchise him again and they think they can just get him at 26, maybe whatever it's going to be next year, doesn't work like that. It's 125% of the previous franchise tag if you try and do it twice in a row. The only player I can remember that happening to in recent history was Dak. I believe they did that with Dak back in the day, like a couple years ago. But it's franchise tags and transition tags are used as, like you said, just a temporarily, like, put a pin in it. We don't want to lose you. But it's heavily encouraged to work its way towards a long-term deal.
Right. All right. Let's move on. A next question from Jay-Z Fighting the Duopoly asked, do you think John Morton was hired potentially as a bridge offensive coordinator? He helped build the offense with Ben, then went to Denver to help build their offense. Now he's back to help build an offense for potentially a next offensive coordinator, maybe David Shaw or Hank Fraley still in training. Maybe he's betting that he can parlay a successful season into an offensive coordinator, into another job like Kellen Moore this past season. It's an interesting concept, right? Like, because when I look at someone like John Morton, given his age, given how long he's been around the league, he does kind of have the makings of that, like, senior offensive assistant role. But he's an offensive coordinator, and only for the second time in his career. And so it's an interesting I mean, I don't think I reject the hypothesis here, because I think Dan would just hire someone even if they weren't quite ready, right? Like, I think if he thought Hank Fraley was their future offensive coordinator, he would make him his offensive coordinator and then just have John Morton around as that senior offensive assistant. It's kind of what they're doing with Kelvin Shepherd on some end. Like, Kelvin Shepherd is very new, very, he's only been coaching for 5, 6, 7 years, whatever it's been. But he talked about it in his interview with Dan Miller this week, how much having Dom Capers in his room his first year there. Dom Capers was like the assistant outside linebackers coach to help Kelvin Sheppard. Like, to me, that shows that the Lions knew Kelvin Sheppard was on this track. He was eventually going to make bigger and bigger strides, and so they wanted Dom Capers by his side. If the Lions were going to do that on the offensive side, I kind of think they would have already had that plan in place, and I don't think John Morton would be the placeholder offensive coordinator. I think that would be a disservice to John Morton.
Certainly. I don't think Dan is in the business of temporarily using someone to place hold for someone else. That's not in Dan's character. It would go against the style of coaching elevation and path to future better things like that Dan Campbell and philosophizes on, and what he wants his coaches to be able to ascend to. If he believes John Morton is a potential head coach, and that maybe John's going to be a head coach in a couple of years, and he'll have someone in the waiting, certainly I think that, but I don't think it's a situation where let's put John in, let's just see how he does until the next guy's ready, because this is a team that is competing now, and if he didn't think Morton was ready to lead them now, he wouldn't have the job. Right? Like, this is a guy that he's known for a while, who's experienced, and he's had a lot of really established coaches that he's worked under, and if Dan Campbell didn't think he was ready, he wouldn't have it. He wouldn't have the job. And so I don't think there's any place holding. I don't think there's anything like that they're if they end up losing a guy like Fraley because John Morton is the guy that they believe is going to take them, then I think Dan has to be comfortable with that, because if he thought Fraley was the next guy, I agree with you. I think he would have pulled that trigger now. And
because he took interviews elsewhere. Like, there was a risk in losing him.
Sure.
I don't think Dan would have risked that if he thought he was the better guy for the job in the long term.
Right. This is a team that is contending now while they're still establishing themselves and resetting things and getting, nothing that they're doing is just to place hold for another day. Every decision is made to win now.
Yeah. It's interesting because I do get a sense that of all the new hires, the John Morton hire is the one that's causing the most consternation amongst Lions fans. And I'm a little guilty of it too. I think I expected to be a little bit more inspired by his interview with Dan Miller, which is probably not fair because I'm probably juxtaposing it with Kelvin Sheppard, who just kills it every time he talks to anybody and just makes you want to run through a wall. John Morton doesn't have to be that necessarily, and maybe that's not his style of coaching, or maybe it is. Like, maybe he just doesn't mix with the media that well. But like, it's beyond that too.
Let's also remember, he hasn't had to speak in front of the media in who knows how long. Right? Like, he's maybe spoken in front of the media one time in Denver because of his position that he had before that. Who knows? When he was in Detroit, he didn't have to speak in front of the media. Kelvin Sheppard speaks in front of the media almost once a month, if not more, right? Yeah. Like, and he's been around this particular media for 4 years.
Yeah.
So there's a comfort level for Sheppard to sit down with Dan and be able to say, I know this guy for 4 years. I'm comfortable with it. Morton, he's brand new. There's got to be nerves going on.
But I was just saying, beyond that though, like, his career has taken kind of an unconventional path for this to only be his second time play calling is odd and different and might make people scratch their head and be like, why hasn't he ever done this before? Why is he always kind of in the peripheral? Why is he these, senior offensive assistant type roles instead of calling the plays? And how is that going to work? That's the part where I'm like, I don't know how this is going to work out. I can't pretend like it's going, like I know it's going to work out well. I can't pretend like it's not, but I understand why people are like looking for rationales of why you would hire a 50-some-year-old coach who's only offensive coordinated once before in his entire 30 years of coaching.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, scheme familiarity.
Yep.
It matches up with what he wanted. He helped install the scheme with when Johnson and Goff, sat down and created that scheme. Morton was part of the install on that. Like he was helping the offense understand what they were supposed to do. Like he knows the scheme. He's not going to alter much. This is all stuff that Dan Campbell wanted to keep in place. He wanted that consistency, that fluidity. And so Morton provides that. Now, could you have accomplished that by maybe promoting from within? Yeah, I think that was something that most people had expected. But Morton offers a very similar path to where Dan Campbell wants his team to be, especially in offense.
Yeah. I think that's a good point too. Like the promotion from within, I think because that was the expectation, maybe this has thrown people off because people expected
Certainly.
and me included. Like I got fooled. I thought Tanner Engstrand was going to be that guy. But again, I mean, some people in our live chat are mentioning like it's not always about getting the young hot name, right?
Yeah.
It's not like that doesn't work all of the time. It doesn't work plenty of times. And so I'm not trying to be ageist here or anything like that. It's just John Morton is just an interesting hire, and he has such a unique path in terms of his roles that it's a little unconventional. Doesn't even feel like the right word.
You know what this reminds me a bit of is it reminds me a bit of JMO's introductory press conference where he didn't sleep. He gets up in front of the press. He didn't smile once. Think about how opposite that is from what we know of JMO now.
Yeah.
Like in how he is just this little kid, just like at heart, and he's just full of energy and excitement. And it was completely the opposite the first time he got put in front of a camera in Detroit. So it's all right. Like don't get too caught up in first impressions. I feel like there's a lot more that we got to learn.
Honestly,
in general,
that's only a small part of the puzzle, I think, of why people are at least a little bit like, I don't know if this is going to work with him. A lot of people are saying Vic Fangio in the chat, which age, yes, but he has a very, very long resume of being a defensive coordinator and a head coach.
Sure.
So not quite an apples to apples comparison, but I get it.
No, I do think it was an expectation thing. Like people were expecting an internal hire, and so they had that's what they were looking for. You get a curveball, and now you're not sure how to adjust to the curveball, and so you're looking for something to excite you, and then it's not as exciting because he's just matter of fact and very business, like straightforward here, and But I mean, like, look I liked his answers at the end where he was like, you could see him kind of bubbling when he was talking about, I'm from here. Like, I know what it's like. I've seen these teams. I remember, and you could see him like, you could see the underlying, and I also think he was trying to maintain a sense of professional,ism and not
go over the top. Not cut a wrestling promo.
Exactly. I think he's not trying to be Dan Campbell, right?
Right.
And then
there was a little Dan Campbell in that end.
He was getting there.
Yeah.
He was getting there.
For sure.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I thought was important that he said there that wasn't really known, because when you're, he was senior offensive assistant when he was here in 2022. Is that what he was? Whatever it was.
Sounds about right.
Whatever his title was. He mentioned he was in the quarterback room. That's where he mostly stayed. And it's not surprising given his resume, but certainly notable that he worked hand in hand with Jared Goff, because that is critical.
Yeah, another big thing that Dan wanted to have, right?
Yes.
And so there was only two people that have spent as much time in the quarterback room beyond Ben Johnson, and I mean outside of Mark Brunell, but it was just Tanner and then him, right? Like he was in there for a full year teaching Goff like the playbook and what to do and how to do it. Also, that was Ben's first year. Was that Ben's first year? Yeah. So he almost had He almost had that senior role. He was also the guy that was training Tanner Engstrand to be the guy that Tanner is now as well. So like he had a lot of like pretty important roles back then that I don't think everyone is necessarily privy to or knew about before he got brought back.
RGA brings up a good point that I kind of forgot. This went viral after the Johnny Mo hiring. There's a clip of him from Hard Knocks where they're all huddled around the room trying to make those final cuts, and he's the one that kind of stands up to Dan a little bit and says, hey, we got to keep Craig Reynolds. Like, that guy is everything that we're about.
4 years we're later, about, right?
Right.
Yeah.
It 4 was years very later, much still here. Like, it was the right decision. And so having a guy that, not that there would ever be a guy that's like afraid to stand up to Dan Campbell other than like maybe us public because he's a figure, but like it's important to have those guys that are dissenters that aren't, and I think Dan Campbell's built a culture where people can do that freely and not be afraid, but to see him actually go do it shows that like he isn't like this, I don't know, this personality that's just going to defer to whoever. Like, he's going to have his own opinion and he's going to state it, and that's super important. All right.
That comes with age, as well.
Right. It does. Next question here from David P. We can probably knock this one out pretty quickly. Says, do you see any hypothetical openings that would take Dan Campbell or Brad Holmes away from Detroit?
No.
No, I don't think so, right?
No. I mean, Dan is as invested in this team as you could hope for. With the history, with knowing what the team was about. I don't think a New Orleans opening or a Dallas opening, I don't think those would necessarily draw him back. Like, he loves this city, this town, this state, right? Like, he loves it. And as far as Brad,
Les Snead replacement?
I don't think Brad is ever going to look at that. I know, honestly, like, when you think about what Brad did, like, Brad moved around to put himself in a position to get jobs, to move up the ladder, to get into, scouting, and then he moves to, the only reason he moves to Atlanta is to be around the area that he was, targeting to scout. And so Brad's not necessarily tied to anything. I think, he spent 20 years with the Rams or whatever it was, but I don't think he's like, he didn't live in LA. Like, it's not like he was like, oh, these, like he was part of it and he was invested, but I don't think he's like attached to like that as being something that would like draw him away from Detroit. I think he looks at Detroit as where he got his opportunity and that he owes it. And he, again, has ingrained himself into what the community is about. And he is embraced. And so I can't, even hypothetically, I can't say this opening would be better than where both of these guys are right now.
NFL commissioner? No, I mean, I don't think either of those guys would want that job. It sounds like a terrible job to have. I mean, comes with a pretty good paycheck, but
that's the big part,
right? But yeah, no, I'm with you. I don't. We very rarely see head coach to head coach moves, right? Where you're not getting fired. You're just like, I don't want to head coach here. I'm going to head coach here. That doesn't happen very often, if ever. Certainly doesn't happen with general managing much at all. So I would be very surprised, David.
Right.
But thank you for the question. We'll fit one more here into the first segment. Sticking with the coaches here. Ryan Rott at Ryan on Twitter asks, based on the staff just announced, please rank who you think are likeliest to leave for greener pastures next, for an offensive coordinator, or for a coordinator or head coach job to expand Dan Campbell's trees. So who's most in line to get a promotion externally? I think the coordinators are too early, right? I think we can agree that both those guys aren't probably going anywhere anytime soon. I do think you could say Kelvin Shepard, as we've said from the get-go, he has that kind of head coaching factor.
He probably needs more than a year, though.
He probably needs at least 2-3 years as a coordinator, I would imagine.
I think the easiest route to answer this question is to look at the position coaches that are getting coordinator interviews.
Yep.
So that means Scotty Montgomery has been previously interviewed for offensive coordinator. Hank Fraley, who we just talked about, has interviewed. And then, Deshae Townsend. And then, Casey Rogers was a former defensive coordinator, so I mean, you could put him in the mix, even though I don't know if he would fall under the Campbell tree necessarily.
Right.
But those four, I believe, are the only ones who have done offensive or defensive coordinator interviews. So
Yeah.
I think so if we rank them, I would rank Scotty as the most likely.
I agree. Maybe even for a head coach job, if we're being
Yes,
quite honest.
100%, 100%. I think Scotty, yes, he's been a head coach before at a college level.
Yep.
And so and he's been assistant head coach. And Dan Campbell is the perfect example of going from position coach / assistant head coach to head coach.
Right.
So Scotty's
And
on
that's
that
why
path.
that's why that position exists in Detroit. Is they're trying to
Yes,
make that transition. It didn't happen with Deuce. I think Deuce had the same title, right?
correct.
Didn't happen with Deuce, but Scotty to me is a superstar, and
Yes,
now he's coaching. He has coached multiple positions in the past. He's going to do multiple positions here in Detroit. I think he should be on some head coach lists next year. I think he should get some interviews next year.
I'm with you. I was worried about losing him this year, and so I was surprised it was a little quiet. But I think he's extremely talented and very smart coach, and so I'm very interested to see what happens with him. Number two, it's probably Hank Fraley, even though I refuse to admit it because I love Hank Fraley so much.
Yeah.
I
still have questions whether he wants to be an offensive coordinator or not. I understand he did the interviews that he did. Maybe he was doing it for leverage and to get a raise here. Maybe they were serious conversations.
Let's hope.
I don't know. And maybe it's the same. Maybe I'm just like refusing to admit that he could leave. But I don't know if I
don't know.
have him
Do you think Deshae Townsend? Like I can only remember him. I don't know. Was this his first?
Patriots defensive coordinator this year?
It was 49ers.
49ers, you're right.
But I don't remember if he's
Kelvin
had one
said
in
he
the
had
past. I
multiple
feel like
interviews.
So maybe we just don't know about it.
Right. Damien mentioned on YouTube mentioned someone I was going to bring up. And do you think there's any chance David Shaw re-enters the conversation of being a head coach with a year or two of seasoning here in Detroit? It's interesting because he went last year. He was on the personnel side with Denver.
Correct.
And so you thought maybe that was just going to be a transition for his career. And I kind of still think it might be because when I did my deep dive on David Shaw, like that sounded like something that he was potentially interested in. But the fact that he takes this job as pass game coordinator tells me maybe and listen, like the more and more I listen to that guy, like he definitely has that head coach factor that he could do. I just don't know if it would be on the professional level. He never really got that opportunity.
He's an interesting guy because even when he was at Stanford, he was still doing like media.
Yeah.
Like he was attending the drafts and he was part of their crew. And then when he left Stanford, he was still doing that. Like he was on ESPN's show. So he's a very versatile individual.
Yeah.
And so he could do a lot of different things. I think he could try and be a head coach in the league. I think he could, shift back to media if he wanted to, because there's a lot of coaches that do that because the grind of coaching is hard.
Yeah.
And so media, you can, you get a lot less work for a bigger paycheck for the work that you're doing. Yes. Right. So I don't know. He's very interesting to me. I do think he has the mentality. He was a coach at, was it a dozen years at Stanford, right?
Yep.
So he's there. I mean, he's got the right mindset. It's just, I think he really has a lot of options for what he wants to do.
The last guy that we probably did we mention Brunel? Like, I think he deserves to be in that conversation as well. As offense.
We didn't. Yeah. It's hard because like with Townsend, it's still new. Brunel, it's still new. Fraley, it's still new. But I think Montgomery is just number one with a bullet. And then, I agree David Shaw should probably be in that conversation. But Brunel, I don't know. I don't know. Like, it's very natural transition to go from quarterbacks coach to offensive coordinator happens a lot. Right. I mean, a lot. And being that he being that he played in the league for 18 years, 18, That's insane.
Yeah,
Um,
that is insane.
eh, there's there's a easy transition for that to say like this is a guy who's been around NFL football for a long period of time, even though he may only be light in coaching. There's so much experience that he has that you just can't create in a classroom or on a coaching staff. Like he just it's a lot. And so yeah, I mean I think he could certainly be in the mix. It's still pretty new.
Yeah. All right, we're going to wrap up the first segment there. When we come back, we're going to wrap up some more coaching talk. We're going to talk free agency. We're going to talk extensions, whole bunch more when we come back here on the Midweek Mailbag. We'll be right back. I'm having a really tough time keeping those first segments under 30 minutes. I don't think anyone cares.
Oh.
I'm trying to like be around the 25-minute mark to keep it between 25, like to try to keep it under an hour. But who cares? You guys love it. I've never once gotten a complaint that maybe very early on, but I feel like it's been a long time since anyone has complained that the podcasts are too long.
I find it interesting when they start spreading coaches amongst different positions in order to get them experience, because it tends to lend itself to like bigger roles down the road.
Right.
Like Seth Ryan,
Yeah.
assistant wide receivers coach. Now he's assistant tight ends coach.
Right.
He's probably going to get some bigger responsibility because Tyler Roll, the tight ends coach, is new to the position as well. So they're probably going to lean on Seth for certain things. He'll probably take on some more responsibility in the offense, because right now you have two tight ends and two tight end coaches. That's what you know what I mean? Like
that was weird to see that. Yeah, Seth Ryan moved to a position that, like we were saying the other day, like during one of the other, you typically don't need to second tight ends coach because there's only 5 or 6 of them in your room a season.
Right. So it makes me wonder if it's setting Seth up for a next step, right? And then you broaden his resume and you keep going, and then when you add in like his dad in the coaching lineage that he has, because it's not just his dad, it's his uncle as well, right? And so it sure seems like they're starting to spread Seth out a little bit and help prepare him. And I think he's the guy you're going to watch for down the line, few years now. Couple years from now, he may be, he's going to be a position coach, and then we're going to start talking about him as a potential coordinator down the road. But it sure looks like they're starting to lay the groundwork for Seth as well.
It's an interesting read on the situation, because I had a couple people come to me and be like, did he just get demoted? And I'm like, I don't think so. I can like I said, I can understand why you think that, because again, you're dealing with fewer
smaller
people.
Position group. Yeah. Right.
But I think that's probably the better read of it, is to let's diversify your portfolio here, so to speak. And honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if he's like a little bit of a tweener, right? Like he's probably gonna spend some time in the wide receiver room. He might. I mean, when you're in the tight ends room, that's kind of an extension of the offensive line room in some ways as well. Yeah. So like maybe there's some crossover there too.
He's gonna Jim O'Neill it,
right?
Right. Where he has one title and he also works in another spot and does a little bit of both. And yeah, nice to see Jim O'Neill get a little bump.
Yep.
There's all these little bumps.
Little
yeah, just little slight changes that usually mean we're giving you more money.
Right.
Who's the other one? Carraro, right? Didn't Carraro? They added a senior on top of that.
Yeah.
He went from defensive assistant outside linebackers coach to senior defensive assistant outside line, and that's probably a pay bump.
Yep.
Not to be confused with Tanner Engstrom. Jesse Garimba, he gets his title tweaked a little bit as well.
Next to Dan Campbell, essentially.
Yeah, that I get 4 or 5 times a year. Somebody takes a screenshot of him and sends it to him.
Just mentioning that everyone thinks he's Tanner Engstrom.
Right.
That's funny.
I'm telling you, 5 times a year, I get a screenshot of Jesse sent to me, and someone says, Who is this? Because so many people thought it was Tanner. Even the photographer, even the person who took the photograph that got mislabeled as Tanner with a photographer. Jeez, oh Pete's. I apologize. I'm too worked up. I'm too worked up. I'm too excited.
Like you really want to defend the guy.
Well, like I feel bad because like, oh my gosh, it's so constant.
Yeah.
Like because he's always there because everybody sees him.
I feel so terrible when like the Lions make a new coaching hire, and the introductory post that we have, I've never seen the guy before, so I don't know what he looks like. And then I put up like the very first post about him is a mislabeled photo. That happened this year. Okay,
with Tyler Roll, right?
Yes. Yep.
I'll tell you why. I'll tell you what's funny about that is that you and I wrote the exact same article at the exact same time because we didn't check in with one another. Right.
And we both used the same photo.
We used the exact same photo.
Yeah.
I was fooled by it too.
Yeah.
Like it was the same photo.
I need to be at least a little bit better about that and just like Google search the guy before.
Dude,
but at the same time,
I did. It kind of looked like him, so I understand. Yeah. Like it wasn't as blatant as you know.
It's just frustrating that
sure
we have to pay for someone else's mistake, but again, yeah.
Well, and look at
it's a CYA job.
Do you know how many? There's so many coaching photographs that are mislabeled.
Yeah.
There's
too, right?
Oh yeah, all the time. And like we've been in the room when the photographers are trying to like identify who those guys are, right? And they'll come to us and they'll say, "Hey,
right,
who's this guy?" Like they'll ask because if they don't know, but they basically just have like a roster sheet essentially that like has photographs and like they're just 2D images that they're supposed to like be able to figure out who's what. And it's easy to make a mistake if you're going too fast and you want to get home and you're uploading however many pictures.
And we have pressure too, like where it's like, okay, the news just broke, like we want this out relatively fast, so we're not double checking everything. And that's like I said, that ultimately falls on us, but it's.
Do you know how many pictures there were of Roll?
Not many.
That was it, man.
Yeah.
It was that one. And then another one that looked like it was taken from the top row of the bleachers. Like that was like him and like he was like this big.
Yeah.
And so, there wasn't much.
Right.
So
enough about how difficult our job is. Let me get to some alerts here and then we'll answer some live questions here from our live audience here on YouTube and Twitch. Appreciate y'all checking in. RGA, thank you for the 28-month subscribe to the channel. Says, woohoo, mock draft season. Watch yourself. Butterbean, thank you for the follow. Rob Mendyka, 26-month subscribe to the channel. Says, love the work you guys do. Go Lions. Thank you. Appreciate it. Derek Brooks, thank you for the follow. Lord Goof, 33-month subscribe to the channel. Says, added the Kappa emote to the company's team. And an older coworker has no idea what Twitch is just used to it. Who has no idea what Twitch is, just used it. My work for the week is done. Thank you for spreading the Twitch lure to a non-Twitcher.
Remember, if they have Amazon Prime, they can subscribe for free.
That's true. Le Mans Builder, thank you for the 24 months, 2 years, says, how much will DC influence offensive play calling?
I still think he's going to be a just overarching role, which means that he's going to have a hand in what he wants to say, but he's not going to micromanage.
Right.
He's going to listen in the headset like he does, and he might make suggestions, but he's not going to be any more than he did with Ben. I don't think he's going to be like, no, this is the way,
Right.
I don't think Dan wants to change much of how he approaches preparation and game day. Now he did say he wants to be more involved in offense, but
that seems like a Monday through Saturday thing, right?
Right. Yeah. I think it's just I want to make sure that everything's good but he's not a micromanager, which is
one of his better qualities.
Yeah, it's a hard quality for those in management position. They know it's a hard thing to do.
For sure.
And so Yeah, so I don't expect him to have much of an. I don't expect him to have an influence on game day any more than he did previously.
I agree. Yeah, because he's got so much else going on, right? I
Yeah,
think.
he's also a young defensive coordinator that he has to be paying attention to as well.
Yeah, I
And there's no senior defensive
right,
assistant on this list outside of Carraro.
right. The one thing that I think would be fascinating, and I would love to just be able to do it for one game. Maybe I'll ask Gaiman and immediately get told no. I would love to just have the headset just for a game. Just listen to every conversation that's being. Of course, there's no chance of it ever happening.
No chance.
But like, I don't not access to the microphone. I just want the headset to hear every single conversation that's going on. And to be clear, there are multiple conversations happening at once. Like there are channels, right?
Sure.
Where the offensive staff is talking together, the defensive staff.
Offensive staff's in one booth, defense in another. Hey, if you can get one, I'll tell them I'll go in the other booth.
Right. I don't need to be in a booth. Like just I don't know how it works. Give me a headset up in the media booth, and
If you're a PODD subscriber and you've seen our post game videos, we do them from the Lions coaches booth.
Yeah.
Or Brad Holmes, depending on.
We have been in Brad Holmes' suite or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
But it would just be fascinating to see all those conversations that are happening and to see what Dan Campbell has to talk, what he's saying, what he's listening to. But it's a ton. And so I would imagine the fact that offensive play calling kind of has to be out of his hands. I mean, it doesn't have to be. There are obviously head coaches who do both, but I think, like I said, I think one of Dan's superpowers is that he's able to delegate and trust and make it work without him having to do that.
Yeah, I'd love to do it. There's no way though.
No. I'll ask just for fun.
Yes.
I'll just hey, I'm going to ask you this question just to see how fast you can say no, and I got a stopwatch here.
Just say no. We won't tweet. We won't write about it. We just want because Burke used to get those angles. And I've talked to Chris about how do you get that?
How do you pitch that?
And he basically his basic strategy is he asks for like 50 different things, and he just and he thinks he was like Eamon eventually just gives me one of them.
Right.
And he's like, and so because remember when he went to Alabama for a coaching conference, like when he flew on the team plane with them to go watch he just asked. And
that's one of the things I want to do though, is to do a little bit more of like an out of the box type of story. It's just, I don't know how guys on the beat do it though. Like in the middle of a season when you have to do a million other things, how you do like that weird kind of unique feature.
Oh, I did that once 2 years ago. It was not easy.
Right. Where was I? Oh, Trash Panda, thank you for the 17 months subscribe to the channel. David Lunch, 25 months. And just now, G Money, 23 months subscribed on Twitch, says just got out of exam in time for some mailbag. Let's go. How'd the exam go, G Money? We nail it. All right, let's take some questions from our live audience. Let me scroll up because we got a lot of good ones coming in here. The PODD email did get sent out in the middle of this. It has been edited and sent in the middle of the show. Mgo Korg, how are you following? What happened here? You've been following in a sub forever. What happened? Got an 80? Okay. Great to see Morgan and Hamza doing the mailbag episode. I don't even know. I don't even know what that means, Michael. The streaks don't always show up on my event list. I'm not sure why I didn't see all the streaks. I have to be on a certain, I don't know. Where was I? Do you think an extension for Carlton is more likely a 2-year deal or a 3 to 4 year deal? Lions would seem happier at 2. Carlton would want as much security as possible.
How old is Carlton? I need to
probably 27.
Isn't he 29?
Is he already 29?
I'm not sure. That's why I asked. I'm gonna look it up.
I want to beat you to it. 28.
Okay.
Just turned 28 in December. December 31st. New Year's Eve birthday.
I could see a 2-year deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. I could see a 2-year deal with voids added.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. They might go. I don't know if they might go 3.
So
but this Brad Holmes tends to be cautious.
The interesting thing about Carlton's contract, and we talked about it a little bit on Monday, but I learned a development literally during the podcast from I don't remember who it was. I think it was someone on YouTube who noted that his contract voided this week.
On Monday.
And yeah, unless the Lions did something like I've seen the Vikings do it a couple times, like push back the voided date. We have not gotten word that the Lions have done that, and if they haven't, his contract voided, which means they can no longer spread out his void years, which means his cap hit is stuck right now at just under $10 million, whether he's on the team or not. So that's a dead cap the Lions can't really mess around with, I don't believe, unless they've kicked back that void date.
Correct. Yeah. If they didn't kick back the void date, it is what it is. Yeah. And I think they were prepared for that, or they wouldn't have done the extension the way that they did it. 23 days prior to the start of free agency is a wild number to just randomly come up with. You know what I mean?
But the Vikings must have had those numbers a very similar number too, because they kicked him back. I don't understand if there's a specific.
Sure. It's just 3 weeks. To that. Yeah. 3 weeks before tampering.
I guess. Yeah.
Because right. Why 3 weeks? I don't know. Probably not 2 weeks, because that would be the NFL combine, and they wouldn't be paying attention during the combine, and they probably wanted to get it some attention done ahead of time. So I mean, I guess if I'm the agent, that makes some sense. If I'm the team, you would like a little bit more time, which is why you're seeing the Vikings alter those. Yeah, I mean, it's entirely possible the Lions made an adjustment and we just don't know,
right?
Because his agent didn't leak it, because the team's not going to leak it, right? So the only reason that the Vikings ones were finding out about those is because the agents of those players for the Vikings are the ones that are saying, hey, by the way, you know what I mean?
Right.
So yeah, there could be stuff happening that we just don't know.
For sure. A couple more alerts come in here, and then we're going to jump back to your questions. Q-Note, thank you for the 3 months subscribed using that Twitch Prime. MGO Korg, 46 months subscribed to the channel, says, my toddler took my phone. No idea how he followed again. Fair enough. And OJ McCord, 15 months subscribed to the channel, says, I'm ready for Brad Holmes season. And then just now, AF Pilot, 29 months subscribed to the channel, says, go Loins. Go Loins. Okay. Where was I in terms of questions? Do you see any good questions lined up? Or do you want
Someone asked about Tim Patrick, I thought. Who's going to be wide receiver 3?
Yeah, Patrick coming back.
Yeah, I have to imagine that is a mutually beneficial for both sides to get that deal done. So
yeah,
my prediction is that it happens.
$2 to $3 million deal.
1.5.
You wouldn't go 2?
I would. I just think they got away with paying him the minimum.
Right. So he gets, give him 2.5. Come on. He earned it.
It doesn't bother me. You're talking about a starter level guy. So
yeah. And then that doesn't prevent you from drafting a guy if the right guy is there. It's kind of an ideal situation, honestly, where you bring back you want to run back your wide receivers. Great, they were fine last year.
Yeah, the role that he plays it's easy. It's easy for him. Expectations are not too high. He likes it. He likes being here. He's not demanding. It's a good situation for everyone involved to bring him back. And then you've got a handful of X's in the draft that make a lot of sense to bring in, learn under him, and try and figure it out. So
Yep.
it seems like a no brainer to me. So
I'm with you. Um,
you should ask. Chris says you should ask to do the headset thing during the preseason.
ooh, maybe.
They are a lot more flexible during the preseason. That's for
Right.
sure.
Hmm.
It's
That'd be awesome.
yeah.
Key Schmidt asked, just joined, so apologies if someone asked, do you expect Johnny Moe to be more aggressive with downfield passing than Benny Jets was?
I mean, that's his history, right? His history is to be more aggressive downfield.
Sort of.
Well, I mean, that was, it's also what 7 years ago that he
Right.
did that, right? But that he was more aggressive downfield then. Was Denver more aggressive downfield? I feel like they
A
were,
little
but
bit,
maybe
yeah.
that's just me watching from a distance too and seeing those plays.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean,
But the
it's in
fact is,
his
like, a lot of these guys have just come from West Coast offenses.
yeah.
Like,
The whole thing is
that is
West
who
Coast.
they are. And so
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if there's going to be a huge change in philosophy. I don't know. Like, I think people want two things. They want more downfield shots. They want a little bit more. Maybe not everybody wants this, but I've seen a couple people say it, and I don't necessarily disagree. They want a little bit more like Jared Goff moving around the pocket a little more, like designed rollout type of stuff. Not so that he's running. Like, I don't want him literally running, but like throwing on the run, throwing out of the pocket a little bit more, because it's something he's actually, I think, maybe a little bit more capable of than we've seen. It's just when he's standing there in the pocket, and it's a designed stay in the pocket. That's when he's not going to make something happen very often out of that. But he can throw out of the pocket. It's just a matter of getting him out there. Yeah.
I think you have a really good offensive line, and you might as well let them just
That's fair.
just block.
Sorry, I'm getting emails back from the newsletter, and people seem to like it so far. So it was very interesting newsletter this week, if I do say so myself, because I'll tell you what I looked at, but I'm not going to tell you what I found.
Oh, what a tease!
I wanted to see how unique it was for a team as good as the Lions to disappoint as much as they did in the playoffs.
Wow, that's okay.
So I looked at the last 20 years. And I was like, okay, how many ones? What have all the one seeds done in the past 20 years? How about all the teams that have gone 14 or 2 or better? How about teams who have finished with similar DVOAs? How have they fared in playoffs? I found some interesting things. I'll leave it at that. PrideOfDetroit.com/subscribe if you want to see what I found. Or
Super Bowl win every time.
Or join the Pride of Detroit Slack, because I've already told them what it is. So you have to get hired by me first, and then join our Slack. You can get all those answers. Anyways. Am I scrolled all the way down? I am. Line is set at 1.5 for splash free agent signings. Are you taking the over or the under?
Under.
Yeah. It might be 0. I think I've talked about this both on the last week Midweek's Mailbag and on the podcast Monday. I think there's a very good chance. I think there's a good chance that Brad is going to pull the old line of, we think re-signings are splash signings. And re-signing Carlton Davis,
Sure.
maybe re-signing Levi Onwuzurike, like those might be your 2 splash moves. Not saying they won't sign any external guys. They will. They'll have to. They have to every year. They're not going to literally run back the same 53-man roster, but I mean, you throw Zeitler in there too, like that. You're probably
And Tim Patrick.
And Tim Patrick, yeah. Then your cap space from 40 whatever probably whittles down to at least 20 something after that. I don't know. It's interesting. I think at some point for Pride of Detroit Direct, I'll try to do a mock free agency, because last year actually was pretty. I kind of nailed last year in a way that I didn't expect to. because it's a crapshoot. Let's be honest. I probably got lucky more than smart. A little bit of both. Anyways, Jack Sack, thank you for the follow on Twitch. Do you have any external free agents you're like circling right now? I don't know how much you've been able to dive into the free agency class.
I haven't done a bunch because I've been on the combine.
Yeah.
I really just, I've looked at the guys that I expect them to bring back. Like I'm not as sold on Levi. I do think Carlton, Zeitler, Patrick, all. I think that would be, you'd be in a really good spot bringing those guys back.
Yeah.
I just don't know how much they'd be willing to spend,
Yeah.
And I'm just trying to scroll this list really fast here.
Well, let me ask you this name.
Yeah.
BL Miller says, what are your thoughts on Darius Slay?
Are they going to cut him? Like, I don't think they can, right?
No,
like his contract is kind of.
I think he voids or something. Like, because he's been talking about how. Hold on, let me look at Darius Slay's contract.
Please.
It does not automatically void.
Yeah. I think you'd have to trade for him, right?
Huh. Yeah, it's terrible. It's a terrible contract. They don't save any money by cutting him either.
Right.
Why is he going around talking about how he's...
I think because he's close to retiring. I don't know. If
you haven't seen his contract, I'll show it on screen here. So, 2025...
I've looked at it. It's kind of wacky.
Hold on. Okay, so some of it is an option bonus. So this is a little but like, is that the signing bonus proration plus an option bonus that he paid last year? Like, there's a messiness to it. I don't know if these numbers are 100% right. Like, I think they must be though. He's not a big cap hit this year for him, but a lot of dead money if they cut him.
Yeah.
And so that can include the option bonus, which is quite a lot. I guess it's 2.9 times 5. Does it say what the option bonus is? 16. Yeah, it's 16.1 million. So at that point, if you can get out of it before then, I don't know. I'd have to do some math here, but it's kind of a mess. I feel like it's not as expensive as that is, because if they get rid of him before the option, which apparently doesn't kick in until September 1st, like they're only on the hook for, I don't know, whatever this option was. Does it say what the 2024 option was?
I'm not looking at the screen. It's hard for me to see it when I can't see it on the main. I have to like.
I don't know.
And so I can't see the numbers, so can't help you there.
It's fine. Whatever. I think it's going to be more complicated than Slay is making it out to be, and that's not a surprise because players don't necessarily always understand the complications of trading and contracts. That's what they're for.
So this is the one guy that I like, who I don't know why he's flying a bit under the radar. It goes a bit against the grain, and they would actually have to kind of make a shift in defensive philosophy. But I would love a guy like Jeremy Chin to come over and be a third safety, play the nickel, drop him at the linebacker. You can drop him at linebacker. So that third linebacker spot is used less as a blitzing linebacker, and then you use it as like a safety / coverage type linebacker. And then I'd like to see, instead of it that edge opposite Aiden, then you go and you get more of a traditional pass rusher than like a bigger body edge setter type of guy. I've always been a fan of Jeremy Chin's game. I think he's really position flexible. He can be a weapon in a lot of ways. And to pair him with a Branch Kirby mix would give them a slot option that can really evolve the secondary in a way that I think would be appealing to me.
It's interesting. I haven't really followed Jeremy Chin's career since he landed in the NFL. So, but he was always kind of that role. Like that was his. That's what I think
Yeah, I
everyone
mean,
saw him
like
in.
I like him as a play. Like I think if you look at I don't think his PFF grades are that good. I'm gonna look him up. Um, but to me, it's again, it's the idea of what a guy like Chin
Yeah,
could bring to
he
the
was flying around
table.
in the playoff game.
Yeah, he feel like he always has been. Like when he was with Carolina, he was the guy on Carolina that I was
Yeah,
worried about.
yeah,
Um, yeah, I mean, like in Carolina, his overall PFF grades are 3 of the 4 years are below average. One of the year it was above average. Last year in Washington, it was slightly above average. Like they're not anything like that you're going to be wowed at, but I like that type of guy who can be flexible. I think it's a position that I've always thought this team could, evolve if they were able to
yeah.
add a guy like that. And we've seen guys like that doing well. Branch was kind of in that role, but now we've seen what
Right.
he can do at safety. So give me another Brian Branch that can play in the slot. You know what I mean? And I'm not
Yeah.
saying Chin is Brian Branch, but the idea of adding that guy. I mean, maybe look, maybe it is Rakestraw. Maybe Rakestraw turns into that guy, and you play him in the nickel. I don't know. I think Rakestraw has a lot of the tendencies, the physicality. Rakestraw is just he's a little bit. You're not going to put Rakestraw at like coverage linebacker, right? Like he's a corner. He's
Right.
he's he's a corner. Um, you also need depth. Like
Sure.
just because you have a Rakestraw or an Amik in the slot, you're still going to need other guys. Like I like the idea of having three safeties and four corners that can all play. Even though
Yeah.
five of those seven are going to play on a in most downs, like I still like the idea of being able to fluctuate between traditional nickel and then big nickel.
Um, got a lot of really good questions coming in. Let me start with the alerts because they pay to get to the front of the line, or in both cases, just use their Amazon Prime. They didn't pay anything, but they're paying. They're still getting us paid by using their Amazon Prime on Twitch. Anyways, Thano TV asks, or doesn't ask, just says, after 29 months, subscribe to the channel, says, glad to have you guys for the offseason. Last offseason without the POD cast was miserable. Thanks for all the work you put in for our entertainment. Well, we were still around at this point, right? I don't even remember when we got canceled. I think
I could look it up if you really wanted to know.
I'm okay. But we're nearing the point where we stopped last year. But yeah, we are glad to be back, and hopefully there are no unforeseen complications ahead.
April
would
4th.
imagine there are. April
There you
4th.
go.
Oh, so
You're
we got all
welcome.
the way through March.
Yeah. The last show before the shutdown was Twitter Live with which is which is now a show that is no longer here.
Someone this was a question someone asked. I don't remember if it's on YouTube or Twitch. If the interview podcast where we talk about the draft pick with a college writer, the first bites that we were doing in previous years, if that's coming back, the answer is yes, but those are going to be Pride of Detroit direct exclusives. So we're in the midst of trying to do that for the coaches. I've slacked a little bit, but I've also had a tough time reaching some of the, like I reached out to a couple Jets beat writers who were around in 2017 or whatever it was.
18.
whatever.
I think it was 18.
None of those have gotten back to me, so I might move on to maybe a Denver person to talk about Johnny Morton.
That makes more sense.
Yeah. And I got a couple connects there, but we were actually hoping to get one of each with John Morton. Of like what you thought about him then, what people think about him now. But anyways,
should also look into where was he before Denver, wherever he was there. Those beat writers might know a little bit about him as well.
Maybe I forgot where Raiders,
like in 2022 or something,
whatever.
21, 22.
Yeah. So the answer is we're gonna try to have First Bite be pretty active this off season. All of that is going to be on Pride of Detroit Direct. So I want to get coaches First Bite. I want to get free agency First Bite. So if the Lions get any, big names or even mediocre names or whatever, talk to beat writers who know them. And then, once the draft happens, we're going to do that too. I'm just now catching up to the joke that you made.
Oh, good. I was leaving it alone.
Yeah. Yeah. He didn't talk to anyone here. How would we know? Yeah, you want to be our guest for First Bite to talk about your thoughts on Johnny Mo in 2022?
Yeah.
All right, Joe. How do I say this? Joe A Tiger. I looked. I saw eat in there. I saw at in there. Joe A Tiger. 4 months says, is there any logic to looking at teams with cap issues and seeing if there are any players who we like on their teams that are better than free agents available, like anybody on the Saints, for example?
As far as like trading for,
or cap casualties, right? Like looking for cap casualty possibilities. I think
that is a very common question that I think we get every offseason. Is who are the cap casualties? Who can we trade for? The problem with trying to figure that out is that 95% of the time you're wrong. Like, like it's so hard to predict. Even if you talk to the beat writers of a team, you're still you're getting
sometimes
you're getting a lot of speculation and stuff.
Is you can be more accurate than like who's going to resign, who's not going to resign.
Right. Yeah, it's a challenging exercise that ends up being that doesn't end up coming to fruition more often than not, I guess is where I'm going with that.
Let's just pull a random website,
okay,
and see who they think the Saints might cut, because I'm sure there's been a million articles written about it already. Saints cap casualties. Bleacher Report picks 3 Saints veterans as likely cap casualties.
Dude, I've seen some of their cap casualties from Bleacher Report. Did you see what Bleacher Report suggested the Lions cap casualties were?
Is that the one that was like Alex Anzalone and
Amik? Yeah, there was one more, and I was like,
let me see, because this is one of those articles where they do one on everybody. DJ Reader, Amik, Jalen Reeves, Maben.
Oh,
not
okay.
Meek, probably not Jalen. DJ Reader is at least I think it has a small possibility.
Oh no, man! You remember when they flew him in? They gave him a one-way ticket, and then wouldn't let him leave.
They stranded him.
They were like, "Yeah, so you're gonna stay here. We'll give you that ticket home when you once you sign."
So the Saints' 3 cap casualties are defensive lineman Kalen Saunders.
No, look, I know people are going to like him. There is a off-field history that does not mesh with this organization. If I'm remembering correctly, hold on, I better double check before I say anything. But I definitive. But I believe
it's KHA.
Oh yeah,
L-E-N. Kalen Sanders. Wide receiver Cedric Wilson Jr. is another one. Tight end Foster Moreau the third. Not sure any of those guys be eager to bring in.
Okay, hold on. Now I'm feeling bad. I got to double check. Why? Because I was asked about him at the trade deadline, if I'm not mistaken, and I uncovered something, and I was like, "Oh yeah, no."
I don't see any. There's no controversy section on his Wikipedia page, which is always a good sign.
That is a very good sign. So maybe I'm getting him mixed up with somebody else. All right. All right. I'll back off a little bit. There's someone from the Saints.
Yeah.
An edge rusher from the Saints. What am I thinking about then? Now I got to find it because I don't want to be mad about him. I apologize, Kalen Sanders.
Granderson? Someone said maybe Granderson.
Oh, yeah. I think it is him. I think it is Granderson.
But I like Curtis Granderson so much.
I don't think it's Yeah, Carl Granderson is the one. I got him mixed up. That's my bad.
Apologies to Kalen Saunders.
Yep, I tried to back that off as quick as I could.
Sack the Pack, thank you for the 6 months subscribed on Twitch.
Thank you, Austin.
Full State Farms asked, do you think the Lions play the comp pick game? Like Baltimore seems to not re-sign a lot of guys. My initial take on that is I don't think they're going to intentionally do that. I don't think there will be a, hey, let's go into this offseason. We're not going to make a lot of splash re-signings. We just want, we'll lose Levi. We might lose another guy. We might lose Carlton. And then we'll just try to recoup some draft picks there. It might work out that way. Like they're getting to a point in their franchise where I think they might just start getting some some compensatory picks because they're not going to be able to hold on to everybody. I think Levi's a great example where he could be a guy that garners a contract that will get you a third round compensatory pick, but you also can't sign anyone else, right? You can't go out and sign someone else to a $10 million contract or it's going to cancel part of that out. Now, if they go the trade route, if they trade for Myles Garrett, let's say, that does not factor into the compensatory pick. And
Correct.
so, you trade a first and a third for Myles Garrett and you let Levi walk, and those are the only big moves you make. Suddenly you only got Myles Garrett for a first round pick because you get the third back. You want to play that game and feed back into that narrative? I mean, that's kind of how it would work out, but one, I don't think you're going to get Myles Garrett for a first and a third, particularly the Lions and third. Second,
I was about to say I'm all in on that for a second, but now,
sorry.
Now that you're saying it's not,
sorry to immediately burst your bubble.
I'm back off then.
Sack the Pack. I kind of think the Lions' biggest signing is going to be Carlton Davis.
Could very well be. I think it's good to go in with the expectation that is what it's going to be, and then you'll be like, "Oh,
yeah,
yay!"
See, I think that's generally like my mindset. I don't know if I'm consciously doing that or unconsciously doing that. But I hate being on the other end of that, where it's like you get all these dreams of we're gonna get Myles Garrett, we're gonna get Max Crosby, we're gonna get whatever, Trey Hendrickson. We're going to get Darius Slay. We're going to like all these pie in the sky stuff. And not saying that it can't happen, but once you put it out there that it's a possibility and it doesn't happen, suddenly you're disappointed no matter what happens as long as it's not that, right? If it's not that, then it's a disappointment. I don't like to be that way. Biggest surprise signing? I don't know. How can I predict a surprise? Because then it would no longer be a surprise if I predicted it.
I get that. That's also one of the things that, like, I get people that say, like, who is, like, someone that the Lions are going to be able to, like, you know, who's going to be like a value guy? Like, who are they going to get that like falls to
Oh, in the
them? And I'm
draft?
like, yeah. And I'm like, I don't know. Cause I always think if it's a guy I want, I think he's going to go earlier. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like, and so it's hard for me to predict like who might fall or what, you know,
Yeah. Right. It's
those are hard. Those are hard questions. Those are hard
sleepers. Yeah,
questions.
the whole sleeper thing, right?
Sleepers, right? Yeah. Cause they're not sleepers in my mind, even though
Right.
they might be quote unquote sleepers
Right.
in.
It's like bold predictions. It's like, well, if you want me to make a bold prediction, it's probably going to be something I don't think is going to happen. If you want me to make a
Mhm.
prediction, it's not going to be bold because it's what I think is going to happen.
Yeah, it's like one thing I know.
Sorry.
Um, like for example, Brian Branch.
Mm-hmm.
I thought Brian Branch was awesome,
Right.
and I thought he was a top. I had him 12th, I think, on my board, and I was like, he should go. But I mean, I probably could have said, oh, he's a safety. He's probably going to slide. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
I didn't think he'd slide to 45. But yeah, those are really hard. Those are hard questions, is my point.
This is an interesting one from Phenom. It says, how excited would you be if the Lions just re-signed almost all of their current free agents, and then just added the draft picks? So no splash re-signings or no splash external signings. You just basically run it back with most of your guys, and then you add your 7 draft picks.
I think I'd be slightly underwhelmed, but I guess it would also depend. Just because I'm not expecting much to come out of the draft, I'm looking at the draft now as you might get one guy who's like gonna for sure upgrade,
Yeah.
and then you're gonna get a couple other guys that are gonna be pushing for snaps, and then that might be it.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it's
But
all
at the
depth
same
after
time,
that.
like, it's just the roster is so good right now that
It
like,
was, but
I wouldn't
like
feel
we
bad.
also there were also flaws in it, like
No.
like Davenport. Like I would like to have a more reliable edge opposite Aiden than Davenport. So that would disappoint me if they were just like, we're gonna bring him back and we're gonna be just fine. You know what I mean? So.
Sure.
But I mean, if you told me they're going to draft an edge in the first round, then I'd be like, all right, I'm a little
back in.
calmer
I'm
about
back
this.
in.
Yeah, all right. So I do think there's opportunities for them to get better, even though because of how the foundation is, because of the way their contracts are set up. I think there is opportunity for them to bring in maybe one impact player, re-sign a couple of their guys that are important, and then also fill out some more depth.
Yeah.
That's really the key is I think you can upgrade some of those depth spots.
I want to go back to one thing you said there, which is like with the draft, you can probably expect one upgrade, one starter, and not much else. And
right.
I don't disagree with you, but I want to point out with like, I'm sure a lot of people hear that and they're disappointed. And that's because Brad Holmes has set a ridiculous precedent.
Yes.
And today
it's the roster's also crazy deep.
Yes.
Like, so it's a lot harder for those
Right.
guys to get in.
Yes. It's the roster is better, and Brad Holmes has done something that is it's impossible to continue to do. Today, on Pride Detroit at 10 o'clock, we posted our picks for Rookie of the Year.
If everyone didn't pick, I haven't read it.
Yeah.
If everyone did not pick Terrion, there's something wrong, right? Because he's the option.
There was one person who didn't carry on, and the person they put, I'm not going to throw anyone under the bus, is technically not a rookie, so I did not include it in our post.
Jake Bates?
Yes, Jake Bates is the person that this person put.
I
didn't include it. I understand why.
I mean, he's in his first year, so
kind of. He was with a team in 2023 in the
but
offseason.
on the practice squad, right?
Yes. I don't even know if he made it to the practice squad. I think it may have just been the 90-man roster in the offseason.
Right. So he kind of Shane Zylstra's it,
Yes.
like where Zylstra was
Yes.
in his first year and could have qualified as a rookie, but didn't
Right.
technically qualify as a rookie.
Anyways, the point being, in my intro to the rookie of the year article, I did something. I was just like, I was looking back at the past and be like, listen, this is going to be boring, but here's how good he has been in the past, which is an embarrassment of riches. Each year prior to last year's draft, he drafted 3 guys who are playing at a Pro Bowl All-Pro level each year. Year 1, Sewell, McNeil, St. Brown. Year 2, Hutchinson, Jamo, Kirby. Year 3, Gibbs, Campbell, Laporta, Branch. Like, that is ridiculous.
Yeah. Terrion was the best corner in the draft, in my opinion, too. I think he's when the dust settles, I think he's going to be the best corner to come out of that draft.
Wow.
I know Quinion had a great year, and I know but
not just Quinion in Philly.
Oh, I know.
I can't think of the other guy's name right now, but
no, there was another one too that played well. No, I know what you're saying. There was a couple of guys that played extraordinarily well as rookies. Oh, you're talking about the Iowa kid.
Yeah, Cooper DeJean.
The picks, Cooper DeJean. Yeah. Well, we love Cooper DeJean. Like that was fun.
I know he's nickel.
But he's basically he was like kind of like a Brian Branch-esque guy.
Right, of course.
And so now that I've seen how Branch, that's why I want the next Cooper DeJean. That's why I'm looking, I think
that's why you're Jeremy Chin.
Malachi Starks could be a lot of fun. You know what I mean?
I was talking about him earlier.
Well, I'm trying to will it into existence, right? Malachi had a down year too. Like he's a guy who, in a lot of ways, like Branch, is probably if he came out a year ago, you'd be like, this kid's a top 10 talent, but he's a safety, so he'll get drafted a little bit later.
Yeah.
But now he's coming off a down year as well, and so people are going to be like, nah, he's probably good enough to slip into the first. He's probably good enough to get in. The talent's there.
Right.
Like I like him a lot. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think Arnold's going to be better than Sanders?
I love Mike Sanders. So it's hard. Yes, I do. I think Arnold's ceiling, like Shep, is way above where he is right now.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that quote from Shep was definitely interesting and a little eye opening when Dan Miller asked him, like, hey, every year it seems like someone on defense is taking that big jump. Who is a guy that you see doing that? And first guy that comes to mind, TA.
The crazy thing is because we had this question earlier, is who could take the biggest second year leap? Mm-hmm. As much as I think Terrion Arnold is going to improve, there's all of the other guys could make quote unquote bigger leaps considering where they are to where they could be.
Right.
Rakestraw could end up being a starter. That would be a huge leap if he ends up winning like a starting role. Christian Mahogany, if he ends up winning the starting role, which is kind of like where I'm expecting him to go.
Right.
Like Christian Mahogany, that could be like 6th round pick to starter.
Even, like Mackay was kind of turning it on a little bit before his injury. Like I expect him to be a rotational guy that's getting 20 to 30 snaps a game.
Yeah. So
suddenly you're looking at the class a whole lot differently. And that's not even talking about whether we see, Giovanni Manu ever become a starter.
Right. And that's kind of what I'm expecting from this class.
Yeah.
Is I almost wonder if we need to start looking at who are the free agents in 2026, because they're going to take that first round guy to, that can challenge right now. But then like the second round pick may feel like a 2026 need. Like, this here, I'm just for giggles, like a DJ Reader, like starter, contracts up after this season, take a defensive tackle and that guy is now a starter a year from now.
Oh, you mean Broderick?
Crazy. Okay. Well, come on, Broderick. You got to show me something first before I'm ready to anoint that.
Justin, we're not going to do a 2026 mock draft. No, stop it.
But I'm saying it to fill needs in it, right? Like, it's crazy to think, and people are gonna like, when I say this position, people are going to be like, "You're nuts for thinking this." Linebacker, like.
Yeah,
Jack Campbell's the only one signed after this season. And we don't know what's going to happen with Alex. We don't know what's going to happen with Rodrigo. We don't know if Derek Barnes is coming back this year.
Yeah.
Reeves Maben's contract's going to be up. And if you're telling me there's a guy in the second round that you think is Jack Campbell, and you can put him on and he can be LB3, he can challenge with Malcolm, he can get some experience, and then a year from now he's a starter, they might take that guy in the second round, and people will lose their minds, and they will be like, "What are we doing?"
Can you remind me?
That's LB6.
Can you remind me who the Lions' defensive coordinator is?
No.
Okay.
I think he's a linebacker. He was a former linebacker. I seem to remember that. Even he was talking about how he has to like calm himself down from like
I was gonna say
scheming everything towards linebackers.
That was a funny part of his interview with Dan Miller, where he's just like, "Yeah, it's gonna be an adjustment because I see everything kind of through the linebacker's eyes, but at the same time, a linebacker understands every aspect of the defense, right?"
Of the top like kind of 6 guys that I have, like 4 of them make a lot of sense, and that are like that fit exactly what the Lions are looking for. I know they've already met with at least one of them, and they probably met with more. But like,
what, at the Shrine Bowl where everyone meets everybody?
Yeah, exactly. I know they've met with a few of those top guys. Well, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
So, yeah, who knows? Do I think Alex Anzalone gets extended? I would have said yes if Aaron Glenn was still defensive coordinator.
Oh.
But because Anzalone loves Glenn, and I wonder if he loves Glenn more than he loves the Lions. I wonder if Aaron Glenn would be like, "Hey, your contract's up in a year. I'm going to make a hard push for you at Anzo." And because I don't know, I could see it. Like, he's very connected to AG, like very connected.
We're going to talk a little bit about extensions in the next segment, so don't skip too far into that.
I'm not. But, I mean, I think Anzalone is great for what they do, and he's such a massive piece. But if they're worried about maybe losing Anzalone, they may draft a guy. And it might be early, and people, again, I'm telling you, people are gonna lose their mind.
Which is ridiculous. Like, how many times do
I know?
have to? And I know.
If they come out of the draft with a safety in the first round and a linebacker in the second, people are going to freak out. But yes, go ahead.
Well, no, it's not that Lions fans should have blind faith in Brett Holmes. I don't think there's any position at any job in the NFL where you are above, I don't know, criticism, right?
Sure.
But I don't know how many times you have to tell people that the draft is not for the rookie season. The draft is for
not anymore.
Needs. And it generally isn't.
Because
generally isn't.
Well, for good teams, that's kind of how it works. Right. Like we were asked about Baltimore letting guys go. Have you ever seen Baltimore's drafts? Like, they're not playing like multiple guys. They're drafting 10 guys.
Yeah.
And like the first one might start, round 1 might start, round 2, might get some things. Yeah, I might end up getting a guy in round 3 that starts just because they pick for value. Like, they're like, oh, look, the best center in the draft just happened to fall to us. Let's just take him and then we'll start him.
Right.
Just because the Lions are going to get to that point where they can just sit and just wait for the guy to fall to them. Well, I don't know if it's in Brad
already
Holmes'
at that spot.
Future.
Yeah,
right.
That's what I was going to say. I don't know if Brad Holmes has the patience to do that, but he could right now.
Right. But he idolizes Ozzie Newsome, and
Yeah.
that's Ozzie's strategy was
Yep.
just I'm going to sit here and let you guys fall over. How many years did do we look at the draft and go, how did the league let that guy fall to the
Right.
Patriots? Or how, when the Patriots were good? How did we let that
It's
guy
starting to
fall to
happen
the
with the
Chiefs?
Lions, right? It happened
Right.
with Ryan Branch. It happened with Christian Mahogany last year.
Yeah. And then so it's a shift. It's a shift in how we have to look at the draft because good teams that have a lot of depth don't have multiple rookies unless they're rookies that just happen to fall to them at a certain spot. So
Yeah.
I
They're
it's
they're
less
really
exciting. It's less exciting
yeah.
for draft nicks, but at the same time, it's how you build winners by just taking
Right.
the best player that's there. Yeah, Lamar's another great example. They just waited
As
on Lamar, right?
as you've kind of outlined during some of your combine preview stuff, there are really only one or two positions that are like, oh, they're set up for the future here. They really only need like a day 3 guy to compete.
Oh yeah. Let me tell you. Let me tell you. And then I spend hours and hours combing through day 3 guys to try and find if that day 3 guy can fit. And what do I get in the comment section? We don't need a tight end. Oh yeah? You have 2. You don't need any more? You just need 2. That's it. You don't need day 3 guys that I went through all of the film of all the top 20 guys and picked out the 5 guys that I think are going to
Eric
go in the middle to
walked
later rounds
uphill in the snow both ways to find
like
you a day
I'm
round
finding
6 tight end
do you know
from
how hard it is to find
Liberty.
blocking tight ends on day 3 that actually might block well enough to appeal to the Lions to play a tight end 3 role? We're talking about a guy that gets at max 12 snaps a game and probably closer to 8. But I'm combing through the film looking for these guys to put them up on this little watch list. And every comment is, oh, we don't need a tight end. Come on. I am busting my butt to find these guys that no one cares about that's going to play 8 snaps. But that's where we are in the draft process because those are the guys that are going to get picked and people are going to be like, well, I don't know. Why did they take that guy? Well, they took that guy because he's a blocker and I'm feeling very underappreciated with my draft research because of the comments section.
I've been trying to defend you a little bit because I think there.
Oh,
there people,
I ended up on Reddit.
Yeah.
I ended up on Reddit. We don't need a running back. Well, you might need an RB3. So
Right.
I picked a bunch of RB3 guys. Like I didn't put Genty on there and be like, oh, Genty would be a great guy to watch in Detroit. Watch him at the combine. No, I went through 30 running backs and picked out 5 of the back. I mean, whatever it was.
Yeah. No, but my favorite is the people that don't understand one that it's a combine preview series where you're doing it for every position because they read the headline. It says Lions need to watch these 7 guys at the combine, right? And they're like, they don't need to watch anybody. Like, what do you mean? Like, they think it's a take. They think it's like an opinion. Like the Lions have to look at these guys because the running back position is so low. And I'm trying to tell these people like, this is not an opinion piece. This is like, here's a position. Here's the Lions' level of need. You literally say it in every single article. You're not saying, hey, they need to go out and get a backup quarterback. They need to go out there and get an RB2. You're not saying any of that. You're
No.
in fact saying the opposite. And then you're matching the players with that level of need. And there's not a take being had here. It's just, here are the guys that the Lions are probably looking at every position. Because, I mean, can you imagine if a general manager went into a draft and is like, I'm not even going to look at the running backs. Let's not scout the running backs this year. We don't need one. We know it's not you guys, chat. You are the good ones.
Yeah, every tight end that I picked is not on any top 100 list that you'll find amongst any of the national analysts. Like not a single one is going to be anywhere near the top 100. And to be honest, 3 of the 5 guys I recommended are probably going undrafted. but they're at the combine and they do something and they could end up. So okay, all right, my rant. I'm gonna take a breath here.
I was
And
gonna let you
stop.
go because we don't normally get. I get that, Eric, all the time. I hear stuff like that all the time. You guys don't get to hear it as much as I do. Apology accepted, Phil. All right. What's your out? 11:30. If so, we got to get going here.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's get back into the show. Might have a tiny bit of time afterwards to get to more of our live viewers' question, but we got to get through the podcast so those that aren't here can get a.
Let me tell you about Week 18 in 2022 against the Packers.
No, stop it! Stop it! Stop. First of all, stop taking comments and just taking their jokes.
That's great. No, that's what I'm doing.
You're
I'm
stealing
not.
their jokes.
I'm congratulating. I'm recognizing that joke. That's what it was.
Yeah, you're doing the Twitter version of stealing someone else's tweet without.
Oh no!
Without even crediting. That was sweaty doofus.
There you go. I forget that.
We're gonna start calling you Detroit Times.
Oh gosh. Okay.
Kidding.
All right.
They credit. There's some far worse offenders out there.
I'm sure.
All right, I got to find out where we were.
We left off on Elvis Wind.
That's what I thought. All right.
Yep.
Here we go. Welcome back to the Midweek Mailbag Podcast. Second segment here, answering your question. Then, as always, if you want to submit any, we record these typically either Tuesday night or Wednesday morning. So use the hashtag AskPOD. Look out for Twitter questions that we send out there, calls for questions, and of course, if you're Pride of Detroit Direct subscriber, you can just respond to the super secret email. We got this one from Twitter, from Elvis Wind, who asks, which new assistant or position coach could have the biggest impact next season? Do you think any of the coaching changes moves the needles on keeping our free agents or signing external free agents?
I don't know if position coaches will necessarily impact free agents as much as like the coordinators might, right? Mm-hmm. If you're keeping a coordinator, if you have a defensive player who, it was really liked what Shep did, and then now Shep's in a coordinator role, that might entice them to return. But I don't think there's a lot of free agents that are necessarily making their destination decisions based on who the position coach might be. Now there's going to be situations where it happens. Go ahead.
Right. But there's also the flip side of that, right? Where your position coach is like, I can vouch for that guy over there. Bring him in.
Certainly. And we have a couple of those guys that we've seen added that are coming from the college ranks. So then there's going to be some college guys that are also like, hey, look, Tashard Choice coached at Texas. Oh, there's a running back from Texas in this draft. I bet he knows everything about that guy. Now, does that mean he's going to end up in Detroit? No, not necessarily. But he's at least, you can kind of connect the dots, and you put a little watch on that guy to see, hey, does he fit? Does he match? Is he a guy that could end up in Detroit? So I don't think there's necessarily like a definitive straight line, but yeah, the connections, they certainly can happen. As far as which one will have the biggest impact on next season, I think you could pick a lot of different coaches. I think one of my favorite new coaches is Tashard Choice, but at the same time, that running back room just needs to be maintained. You know what I mean?
Right.
It doesn't
screw it up.
Right. It doesn't need to go to another level. Now, can it? Absolutely. I think it can. I think you can you still haven't seen Gibbs' ceiling. Vaki is still in a stage where he's turning into something else. And so there's opportunities for that room to get better and deeper. And so I do like what the Choice hire. As far as like which one is going to make the biggest impact, I think that's a lot harder to say. I don't think there's like one that I could necessarily like put my thumb on and say this is a room that struggled, and now this addition is going to help that room. Um, I don't see that spot out there. I don't know if you do. If you see a position coach that like can
Well,
definitely is like an upgrade at his room.
I don't know if he's an upgrade at the room, but I think it's maybe the most important signing they've made. And I think that's Casey Rogers, the defensive line coach, because that remains an extremely young defensive line. It remains a defensive line in flux that just continues to get their coach taken away every single year. And it's potentially the room that gets the most overturn when it comes to this offseason in terms of personnel. And so
Yeah.
uh, I think it's interesting, and kind of relating it back to the other question with free agents. Max on our staff wrote an article about Pat O'Connor today.
Yeah.
Guess who worked
Connection.
with Pat O'Connor a lot?
Yep.
Casey
Certainly.
Rogers. And so now he has someone in the room that could certainly vouch for bringing him back. And I think it was a really smart connection to make. And I would not be surprised at all if Pat O'Connor re-signed here. Dan also spoke really highly of him. So did
Oh yeah.
Terrell Williams. And when I look at like Casey, and because I think they might be active in the defensive line market, like I'm also looking at some former Bucks. I'm looking at Tryon Shoyinka. I'm looking at Nelson. I can't remember his first name. I mentioned him both on the POD cast. I think like those are the kind of connections you can make, is like looking at those positional coaches. What players have they coached that are now free agents or that are now available to draft? Those are the connections you can make. And I just think, I think he's got to be the most important position coach that they've signed. And it doesn't, I wouldn't necessarily say it's going to be an upgrade. I mean, we heard Dan Campbell say he thought Terrell Williams was, if not one of the best defensive line coach in football. But, you know, Casey Rogers certainly has a pretty darn good resume out there too.
I didn't know. I didn't know the linebacker Tryon. I didn't know he was a free agent. That's very interesting to me.
They declined his 5th-year option, so his rookie contract is over.
He was a key cog in how they made their defensive line a hybrid, because he was a guy who was capable of rushing but also dropping, and he allowed them. Well, he's more edge than Sam,
right?
But his ability to drop is what allowed them to. So like he'd be on the edge, but he'd drop, and so then their Mike would blitz. So you'd still be rushing 4, but you're overloading one side with a blitzing linebacker off one side and then dropping from another. And so, but it was his flexibility in being able to drop that allowed them to bring different blitz angles and stuff like that. And I do think that that's something that an element that Rodgers could bring to Detroit. Sure. I don't know if they necessarily have that guy. Like Davenport, if he was ever healthy, could have been that guy, but he's not. So maybe that's a guy that's a target they look in the draft. Maybe they look at Tryon. Maybe it's interesting. I didn't realize that he was a free agent, and I do think that's a pretty neat connection that I think people should maybe pay attention to.
Think about. All right. Next question here comes from Ash. Asks, do you think there will be any changes in what the regime likes on the defensive line with a new defensive coordinator and defensive line coach? I.e., will they move away from bigger can crushers like Scourton and Stewart from Texas A&M University?
Yep.
To lighter speed guys like Pierce and Green?
I think Green makes a lot of sense because Green can stop the run. So he's one of the best pure pass rushers in this draft, but he can also stuff the run. So that's why Green is going to be a guy that's been paired to the Lions quite a bit.
It's Mike Green, not a Marshall.
Yep. And Green stock has been rising too. For example, in Daniel Jeremiah's first mock draft, he paired him with Green at 28. And Daniel Jeremiah's second mock draft, he had Green going in the top 10. So Green is very much a guy that people are starting to figure out, and because of that, like there's a lot of really good traits about him, but he would fit the Lions very well. The Texas A&M guys, they are bigger. They're like 270 plus 280. They can be a little bit more relentless. And so like Scourton, I believe, is the guy that Dave Burkett just Just Burkett.
Mocked.
I always did it again. I don't know why I do that with Dave all the time. Burkett. Burkett just mocked him to the Lions because it's a guy who's a bigger body end and good relentless motor, and so I think you could kind of. It's going to be very situational,
Right.
right? Like it's going to be like if the guy fits the motor and the run stuffing and those skills, I could see them looking at both guys, and saying, okay, we could go either route because of
Yeah.
because they fit the needs of what we want. Even though one guy's 280 and one guy's 260 or 255 or whatever
Right.
Green is.
I mean, we were talking
So-
with the staffer the other day. Like, even if they just continue what they were doing with Aaron Glenn, you can fit any kind of pass rusher or any kind of defensive lineman into the scheme. You can make them a Sam. You can make them a big edge. You can make them a tweener between defensive tackle and edge. Like, they have roles for pretty much any body type that you want. It's just
Right.
it's just you have to have that motor. You have to have that grit. You have to have that football mentality of you're not going to dog it on a single play.
Right. And I think if you can find those guys, right, that's going to be more important to this roster than, oh, look at this guy, he's 250, so he doesn't fit, or he's 280, and so he does. Like, I think you can kind of throw that out. There's a lot of like process of elimination based on weight and stuff that teams do, and the Lions used to do that, but the Lions don't really do that as much anymore.
Right.
You've just looking at like last year's edge rushers. Aiden was 270, Pascal was like 275, Zedarius was like 275, but then like Nate Lynn was like 250. Davenport was in the 260s. Kaminsky was like in that 275 range as well. Muhammad was only like 260, right? Or maybe even a little bit lighter than that, if I'm not mistaken. Ukwu was in like just under 260 or right at 260. Agude was in the 40s.
Right.
James Houston was in the 40s. So you can't, like, with this regime, you can't just look at height, weight, and be like, oh, he's eliminated because he doesn't fit the profile. There's not really a standard profile, especially with edge, especially with the fact that they use 3 different kinds of edge players. You have a lot of things open, and a lot of different ways that they could go. And if Rodgers is influencing that, then maybe you're looking at guys that can drop a little bit, or maybe that they're comfortable at least standing up on the edge. That's what I would kind of look at, because Aiden can do that.
Right.
Aiden can stand up.
Yeah.
Aiden can put his hand in the dirt. And because Aiden can do that, you'd like to have a guy opposite him that can do the same. So I don't think you want to get too in love with a guy who maybe is only a hand in the dirt guy, or maybe a guy that's only a stand-up guy. You're going to have to try and find those other intangibles. And that's one of the things that makes scouting for Brad Holmes, or trying to predict what Brad Holmes is going to do, so challenging, because he's not just looking at height, weight, speed stuff. He's
Arm
looking at like all the arm length is huge with Detroit. Like, they really like the arm length, but they also,
Aiden?
that was the biggest knock on Aiden. Right. And they took him second. So,
Yeah.
so you have to dig a little deeper on these guys. And so, that's why it takes a little bit longer to scout them. And so, pay attention to those watch lists and stuff like that. 'Cause we dig deep on those to make sure that you're getting what you need.
Yeah. I was going to go to Shai Rani next. 1, because I love the reference to the SNL skit. 2, because it's a good question, but we kind of just tackled all of it in terms of what the Lions might be looking for opposite Hutch and some first round prospects that they might look at. So kind of already answered that. So we'll just move on to the next question here. Talking more about free agency and extension, things like that. All Lines Go to Heaven at the Fox Magnet asks, who are some sneaky players that might get an extension this offseason that no one is talking about? Maybe Khalif, Amik Robertson, Alex Anzalone?
Yeah, Alex could be a guy that you could look at.
Yeah.
I don't know if Amik would, because you gave him the 2-year deal for a reason. You've got him in a decent spot right now. If you're going to extend a Meek, my guess is it would be like during the season, like every once in a while. Brad just if he's like really starting to ball out, and
Sure.
I could see Brad being like, okay, we got to wrap this up. Like kind of like what they did with David Montgomery midway
Right.
through the year. They're like, okay, we got to get him done.
Jake Bates.
I Khalif.
Khalif.
Khalif is in the final year of his deal,
He's
and I don't think a lot of people. Yeah, but he still is like one of the fastest guys on the team, right?
Yeah.
Which certainly helps. It's not like he has a lot of wear and tear as wide receiver 4. I don't think you're breaking the bank extending Khalif, but he's a role player, core player, guy that outworks everybody. If your name's not St. Brown, and so those guys get rewarded. I don't think extending Kirby would be a surprise. I don't know if they would extend Malcolm. I think that would surprise me if they did.
It would surprise me
they're
from
kind of wait and see.
Malcolm's standpoint, right? Like, there's not a lot of motivation, I think, from Malcolm to sign an extension. Right. The lines were going to sign him to a starter level deal, and I don't think they would.
Right. So that's why it would be surprising.
Right. True. It would. I'm looking at some 2026 free agents, and there's just, Josh Paschal is maybe the other name you could throw out there, because, listen, we didn't write a story about it because it was just kind of a sub note in one of Dave Burkett's articles. The Lions tried to extend Levi Onwuzurike before last year, before his kind of potential breakout season. I think they could potentially try to do something like that with Josh Paschal if they think he's on the verge of a breakout season.
Yeah.
All right. We'll leave it at that. Next question. Out of the starting players drafted by this organization, who do you see being the first to walk in free agency?
Derek Barnes.
Is he considered a starter? I guess so.
Yeah, he's been a starting. Yeah. He was playing over 50% of the snaps. Is Levi considered a starter? Because I could see him walking too, but I would think put the odds. I would put the odds on Derek Barnes walking before Levi.
Yeah. Those are the two most likely this year. And I think,
but
I think both are kind of like technicalities. I think this is more asking a question down the line. Everyone keeps saying, like, you're not going to be able to keep everybody. You're not going to be able to keep everybody. Mm-hmm. You're not going to be able to keep everybody.
So then the next year would be Hutch, J-Mo, all right, Paschal, and Kirby.
Right.
And it's probably J-Mo. Because, again, we talk every week about how wide receiver is loaded, and it's a position that constantly rolls guys in every year in the draft. And if you're not one of the top 10 in the league, you probably shouldn't. Yeah, you probably shouldn't get, huge money. As a former first rounder with his level of speed, he's going to want a big contract. I don't know how incentivized they're going to be to give a second wide receiver a big contract, top 10 money, right? And you really locked into Amon-Ra for all the right reasons.
Right.
So, if you don't count Derek Barnes, then it's probably J-Mo.
I think the conversation gets even more interesting when you talk about the 2023 draft.
Yeah, none of them. They're all getting re-signed.
Do you think there's that becomes a challenge with balancing your budget a little bit here. Like, you have to structure those contracts in interesting ways so that they all aren't hitting in the exact same year. But maybe the 5th-year option with Gibbs and
certainly helps.
Campbell
and
helps.
Jack. Yep.
But look, that's going to be a really interesting, like, now we're talking about, like, okay, how's that going to impact the, I don't know, 2028, 2029, like, what feels like Monopoly years. Like, the asteroid might hit us before that.
Okay. Can I tell you something? What's interesting in 2029? Do you know what happens that's going to increase the cap?
No.
New TV deal. The TV deal is up in for the NFL in 2029, and they'll renegotiate. And when that happens, buku money, salary cap gets a big bump that year. So if you are the Lions and you're like, hey, I'm worried about, let's just start pushing stuff towards 2029 because in 2030 and try and get those big cap hits then, because when that TV money hits, look out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, fair. But anyways, I don't know if they're going to be able to keep all four of those guys. But it's too hard. It's too hard to project at this point. We don't know what their cap is going to look like in 3 years.
You have 3 Pro Bowlers, and Jack is probably headed towards being potentially a Pro Bowler.
Maybe. I wouldn't jump to that.
I said potentially.
Yeah.
Well, the strides he's making. Sure. You look at how he's getting evaluated. He's in the conversation for it. So Jack has that potential to be a Pro Bowler, and the other 3 already are. So,
yeah. All right, let's move on to the next question. I think last question. Is that right? Yeah. Between the numbers, Anthony asks, Jack Campbell is the only linebacker signed on the roster beyond 2025. Who is more likely to be on the roster in 2026? Malcolm Rodriguez or Derek Barnes? And then what does an Alex Anzalone extension look like? Let's start with Rodrigo or Barnes, because that's a tough one. We've just been talking about both those guys. Barnes is a guy it's hard to know what he's going to do this offseason. I think the Lions would want him back. I think Barnes has an opportunity to potentially cash in, but the injury throws a wrench into all those plans as well. So he's a really tough one to predict. And then Rodrigo, to me, is a guy the Lions have been extremely lucky to have him as long as they have already, where he's not a starter, but he's a guy that can come off the bench and give you starting level play. And if that's the case, I don't see Rodrigo sticking around. If he's smart, I think he can get starter money elsewhere, and I don't think the Lions would be wise to give him starter level money.
The biggest obstacle for Malcolm is the same reason that he got drafted where he did. Is it the 5th or 6th round? I forget which for Malcolm. But
6th at least. I think
yeah,
6th.
I think it was the 6th. And it's the fact that he's not going to fit the size parameters that a lot of teams want.
True.
And he's a little lighter. He's definitely shorter. And there are going to be teams that look at that and say, no, thank you. It doesn't fit what we want. But people forget how instinctive he is and how quick he is, and how he plays downhill and stops the run. Those are things that this team prioritizes, and not all teams will, right? Sure. Different defenses are going to look at him and say he doesn't fit. And so I think for Malcolm, his window isn't going to be as big as a Derek Barnes's is. And I do believe there's a better chance that he would come back than Barnes. Again, it's just recency bias because of, Barnes was in the contract year, and all the conversations we had with him during training camp were all him very focused on trying to maximize himself, keeping me, a little bit cautious on saying I think he's more likely to return. But I don't know. I think Malcolm could be in the same boat a year from now. But what I do, and I don't know about Malcolm,
right?
But I do feel that way. I know how I feel about Derek Barnes, and I know he's looking for more. So I would say Malcolm, just because.
The thing is, I feel like we both kind of feel like both might be gone, right? I think if we had to lean one way or the other on both, it'd probably be both are gone. I just don't see Malcolm returning. The only way that happens is if he gets injured again, because and you got to remember, he's coming off an ACL now, and maybe he just isn't the same player he was next year. And if that's the case, or maybe he gets injured again, or whatever it is, then the Lions can kind of bring him back on a cheap deal and keep him where he is, because I think he's a great guy to have. But again, I think he's a starting level talent in this league, and I think there's going to be someone that's willing to pay him that. I think the Lions probably have a fair amount that they'd be willing to pay to keep Derek Barnes. I think they love him, right? I think they have a defensive coordinator that loved him. And so I think their willingness to stretch maybe what he's worth into a contract that, might be bigger than some are expecting. I think there's a little bit more of a willingness to do that than there is with Malcolm.
Let's also keep in mind that his defensive coordinator that loves him so much also started Malcolm over him at one point because he pays off the guy who does the work and Malcolm was playing at a higher level at that time. And it's switched since then. But at one point, I'm going with Malcolm because it buys me more time to be correct.
That's fair.
And I think it also points to the fact that I think it was the break, right? We're talking about the fact that linebacker is, if you are looking at 2026 with as Brad Holmes does, if you're looking at the 2026 roster, linebacker could be a sneaky need, as Anthony points out, because you only have Jack Campbell. And so does that mean they could target a linebacker earlier in the draft than you would expect? Absolutely. Because with that eye on the future, a linebacker could be a need that they need to address as early as next year.
Well, one thing that could prevent that is the second half of that question that from Between the Numbers, Anthony, who says, what would an Alex Anzalone extension look like? So he's entering the final year of what was a 3-year, $18.75 million contract, so just over $6 million a year. 2026 would be his 32-year-old season. So you're probably either talking about a 1 or 2 year deal at that point. Probably one, if I had to guess. $5 million, $6 million. Again?
No, I don't. I think 5 is probably if he was a free agent this year, I would say 5 is the max based on the free agents that are available and the age that he would be. Like if you look at other 35-year-old free agents or 32-year-old free agents or whatever, you're talking about guys that are making like 5 or 6 million probably is what they're going to end up with. So, you maybe add a little increase to that because it's a year later. So 6.5, maybe it could be your ceiling. It's my guess. And so, you're talking about a 2-year, $11 million deal. Maybe you're trying to give him something like that.
Right.
I'm sure he's not going to be happy with that, but I also think he's probably conscious of the fact that he needed to get paid on this last deal, and he did pretty good with it.
And listen, if you're getting a bump in pay, going from 6.1 million a year or whatever, 6.3 million a year to 6.5 million a year, and you're 32, not a lot of NFL players are getting raises at 32. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. I think 4 to 6.5 is the window, and that's only because of inflation.
All right. We'll close things out there. Thank you to everybody who submitted questions this week. If you ever want to submit questions, you can send them to us on Twitter or through our Pride of Detroit direct email. Or you could join us live on twitch.tv/Pride of Detroit or youtube.com/@Pride of Detroit. We record these either Tuesday night or Wednesday mornings. Just make sure you're subscribed to both those and set up the alerts. That way you don't miss anything. But until next time, I'm Jeremy. That's Erik. It's Chaos. Be kind. And F Cancer.
Recording stopped.
Nice add-on at the end there.
Thank you. All right. No alerts to go through, so we can just hang out for like 5 minutes here. If you won't. There is some mild breaking news here. I don't know if you saw it in the chat. John Dykema getting hired by Michigan State. Lions losing yet another front office member. Their 5th, I want to say, in the last 3 years. I think that's true, which is wild.
Jeez. Yeah,
it's another contract guy, which is kind of frustrating because they just lost their contract guy who Sosna was here for 1 year?
2.
Was he here for 2?
Yeah.
So kind of annoying that they continue losing their contract guys, but
yeah, he was their compliance officer. So that means he was the one that made sure that they stayed within the rules.
Right.
with their contracts. Disner also
Still,
did that
you're
in the past. Like
right.
that was Disner's job when he was in Arizona.
Right.
So it's not like the cupboard's bare. We talk
Right.
about redundancy all the time, right? Um, but when you're talking about legal contracts and stuff, Dykma was the guy who was at the forefront of making sure that the contracts fit within the system properly.
Yeah.
You know, I believe they have another lawyer uh, that does something with the contracts. I need to look up who I think
He's
it is, or
he's
if I
been
can
with the
remember.
team, by the way, since 2011. John Dykema has.
Yeah, well,
It's very what I think is extremely interesting and certainly not a coincidence is that we've had these guys that have been within the Lions organization for decades, and only now are they getting these other opportunities.
yeah, like what? Jeez. I don't know why I always blank on the other guy in Washington outside of Sosna. Um, he was with the Lions like 30 years,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Who was he was getting GM jobs, interviews and stuff like that. Why am I blanking on him? My God, that's embarrassing.
I'm, you know how I am with names, but it's just it's fascinating to me because like these are guys that you don't really hear much about, but then you just go to their Lions profile and they're like, well, when he first joined the team in 1976, like what?
Newmark. I don't
Lance Newmark.
Jeez, oh Pete. And then Sears was in Arizona. That was another one. And then they just lost one of their lead scouts, Mike Martin.
Yeah.
And so now Dykma.
In his current role, so this is what DetroitLions.com says about his current role because it's an update. Responsibilities include overseeing the legal aspects of the club's football operation, negotiating player contracts, assisting with the club's salary cap planning and management, helping to direct analytic initiatives, and coordinating with the league's office regarding CBA compliance, player contracts, and grievances. So now our one guy that we could have asked about Cam Sutton is gone. See how that grievance is going. Maybe that's why he's getting out. He failed to get the money back. Cast you off to Michigan State.
We don't know.
I would not imagine this delays extensions because like Erik said, like they still got a guy who knows all of this stuff.
Yeah, Disner is still the overseer, and they keep giving him money and title changes, and they don't want to lose him. Yeah, it's interesting that both Sears and Newmark and like these guys were with the team, were with the Lions for a long time, and then finally get their due. Yeah, the Sosna one still hurts.
Yeah. Freaking Washington,
man.
I didn't even put it together. Like that, we hate them last year for what they said about Ben Johnson and taking two guys. Now they beat us in the playoffs.
Quickly becoming a rival.
Yeah, F Washington.
Yeah.
I was just going to close things out, unless you got anything else to say.
No, I was going to say Martin was the guy that they targeted after their first draft. He was a veteran guy. And then, they lost. He was a guy who, when they lost Dave Sears, they brought Martin in because Martin was a veteran scout, and they gave him like a bigger role. And so like, I'd be interested to see if they make any more front office moves, because we haven't really heard many front office moves, and they typically don't make these until after April,
after the draft,
right? Yeah. But my guess is we're probably going to start hearing about some new hires in May, because they have been shedding a couple of guys, but like I said, there's redundancy plans and stuff like that. So,
They'll be all right.
you just reload these guys, man. the two leaders, they have a way of making it work. They have a way of finding new guys.
If Miko and Morgan are watching, please start working on is Aiden Hutchinson's extension in jeopardy? YouTube, can we start that?
Yes, yes, we can. Let's just change the title of this, and then we'll just add this clip on at the end.
There you go. Just me saying that, and that's the entire analysis of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No. All right.
No.
There we go.
No. The answer is no.
We got the no clip as well. Just add it on to the end of the podcast.
Yeah.
We'll cut it in there. Easy peasy. Clickerinos.
That's right. And hold on, you got to get the thumbnail really quick. There we go. All right. When are we going to be back next? I don't know. The main POD cast is moving to Sunday nights, so if you want to watch that, probably sometime after 6:30 p.m. Eastern. And then next week, I forgot to mention, next week's Midweek Mailbag is subscriber exclusive. So if you want to catch the Midweek Mailbag next week, you got to be a Pride Detroit Direct subscriber. I'm probably going to record that from an Indianapolis hotel. But it won't be live. So if you're sitting on YouTube and Twitch waiting for the Midweek Mailbag next week, you ain't going to get it. Unless you're a Pride Detroit Direct subscriber. I think that's all the announcements I have. All right.
Cool.
We're going to get out of here. It's 11:31. I've run Erik past his deadline per usual.
That's okay. I'm all right.
All
I
right.
have a second.